let's go back to a little bit of an overview, and Tim, I think I left that for you. You can click it to the next one, congratulating all of you when these pieces initially came together a number of years ago. So I'm going to tell the personal stories, just a few, that one of the hallmarks had always been when we were at Futures, what goes on Futures stays at Futures. So there have been some amazing things, that it's been a quiet, secure place to learn, share things, build relationships, not be hit on by vendors, feel safe, and really learn from the best. And so a little bit is personal, but I'll tell you some of the foibles that maybe in happenstance that made a difference as to why you're here today. That you may relate to some of these in your roles as leaders in the leadership of your institutions, of founding and developing some outstanding programs that are being featured here for Legacy. And I'm just gonna ask Tim to go a little summary. What I'm gonna, if you'll click, initially on the history, as you know, for many years, the primary purpose of the assembly was to identify what are those critical issues you're facing at your institutions, and then ultimately celebrate your award-winning programs potentially for replication. Now, in over 2 decades, 70 institutions have actually won the Bellwether Award, and over 700 institutions have been recognized. And many of you are finalists, and again, you're a select elite group who've been selected by your peers, and I can't think of a higher honor for the great work you're doing. And again, my congratulations for your being here. But Tim, I've got to go back to the future a little bit. Noah. And our 20th anniversary. But before I even get there, I'm going to go back, date line, almost 50 years ago, actually 45. It's somewhat ironic and somewhat fitting as to part of my vision and part of what enabled me to initially, when we founded the Futures Assembly, actually started here in San Antonio, when yours truly was a second lieutenant in the Air Force. I was in associations and institutions that basically, we didn't call it that, but we were lobbyists in my mid-20s, and we had to get congressional authority for non-commissioned officers to get degree granted for the Community College of the Air Force. And in doing that, I went all over the country, from the American Council on Ed to all the national associations. And frankly, folks, it was phenomenal, wonderful experience. But I also said, do I want to be doing this when I'm now my age? It was depressing. I'm quite serious. I've been back to significant events because everybody was reinventing the wheel. They were just picking up something new, trend idea, and how's that going to impact your institution? And if it wasn't during that same time, Bernie Luskin, he's heard me tell the story, I'll shorten it, and I was debating whether or not I wanted to do what I now previously have done in the professorial role. Someone criticized Dr. Luskin was on the advisory committee of the Community College of the Air Force. Someone criticized his mentor, B. Lamar Johnson, Islands of Innovation, well, he's just out there spreading the story. He's never been there and done it. And Bernie reamed him a good one and said, it takes both in this business. You've got to have the people who are spreading the word, and you've got to have those that are implementing it. And that was that personal moment for me personally that said, I could do that. I want to do that. If that hadn't happened, that wouldn't have been my career path. From that, I'll fast forward to from the 70s. Now, ironically, what was going on then in the 70s? I looked this up last night. Watergate, all the president's men, impeachment, Nixon's resignation. Who knows what the future will bring? Anyway, it's ironic looking back. But during that time, I moved to NC State as in terms of the leadership program there. And during that period, any of you remember the book Megatrends? 1982, John Naisbitt, Trends Affecting the World. And again, that was very influential. Now, ironically, back to the Air Force, Back to Futures, I had part of the work I did. There was a plan, the element was classified regarding what are the plans for the future regarding technology in terms of training and development. And one of the trendsetters, of course, when we're not at war, there's more money that goes into the military than in education. So that's a bellwether in my book. Or the corporate setting is a bellwether, a trendsetter. And what I learned was organizational adaptation. All institutions are at different stages. You can learn from each other. A lesson I took away. And let's fast forward down to the 90s. In the 90s, well, I'll go back to the 80s. We've got Apple 76 establishes the computer, the Apple computer. If you follow the development of Apple in later on in the 80s, it picks up in not only the iPad and further iPhone, etc., because part of Megatrend's emphasis was technology and impact. So with that in mind, ultimately then when I joined the University of Florida, and most people didn't realize that that was my primary job, the professoriate, and leadership development for like Morgan Phillips, who was part of one of the original doctoral cohorts behind the scene to put on Futures. That was their learning lab. And that's the folks I'm most proud of regarding, and my goal was not altruistic. It was to expose my graduates to the best outstanding programs out there in the future that they could learn from. And based upon the work of the leadership gap, you wouldn't have confidence in, you'd want to hire them. So with that in mind, when I went to Florida, we had, and again, back to movies, we had the Learning College going on about that time. Terry O'Banion and his work. Additionally, during that time, we had other things going on, unfortunately, regarding, we decided everybody was talking about the new millennium. About 2000, it was 2000 this, it was 2000 that, it was sort of like, so our initial theme was beyond 2000, let's push back that. It seemed to be a ceiling. Terry O'Banion was one of the first keynote speakers, followed shortly the following year by Bernie Luskin, who you'll be pleased to hear from tomorrow, and the emphasis of the great work on technology and that impact. And then from that, but part of the evolution of that was also before I got there. Any of you remember the movie Field of Dreams? I happened to be, when I got back into the professoriate, it was really kind of a down time. We'd gone through the gas crisis as a nation. We had gone through periods of, during a time, the only time you could go to meetings were that if you got on the program. So if you could go to a session, it was a crapshoot as to whether or not you were going to learn anything, because the primary motivator for people to get on the program was to get tribal to get there. Now that's being a little cynical, but that's true. And it was such an issue for AACC. David Pierce, president, had to scale down AACC to ensure they had quality programs, because people started voting with their feet and going to programs where there was value added, like the league was growing. So you put all that together in context, and putting my pieces together, 1986, Field of Dreams, I started Florida, 1994. What if we build it, will they come? What if you take, based upon this context, a bellwether, forget educators, we tend at times to talk to each other. What if we identify an outside person who you know is a trendsetter from the corporate, the business, outside of education, but you know it's coming, and getting you thinking about what are we going to do about it? And so that's when we started recognizing, with the Bellwether Book Award, someone from outside education to come, what are the implications for us in our colleges? What if we select the 10 best, competitively selected? Will they come? And let's focus on replication. You don't want to be the biggest. You want to be a quality program that what you evidenced today and the impact you're making. And then there was a hiccup in the middle of that. About the third year, and Noah Brown's heard me tell the story, yours truly was sweating because we were going to be $5,000 in the hole, and I was going to have to write a check following one of the earlier futures assemblies, because Valencia College was doing our program management, and they were wonderful at putting on a program on a champagne program on a beer budget. But I was in an institute. There wasn't any financial backing, and I'm serious. We were about $5,000 short, and we pulled it out and breaking even. And I was literally in the lobby of the hotel, and we said, well, we've given it a good go. We're gonna have to, I think, call it quits. Elsie Childress from North Carolina, who was at that time chair of the North Carolina Community College Trustees, came up to me and said, Dale, that's the most high quality program we've ever had. Could you help us replicate and take this nationwide? And I said, you know how sometimes something happens and you just trust your gut and flip a switch back to being dangerous, Tim. I said, certainly, Elsie. In fact, we've been thinking about establishing a trustees commission. Are you willing to serve in that role and help us do this? I went from $5,000 in the hole for paying a keynote for the next one for $5,000 to kick off the next one. And if she hadn't walked up at that point, you wouldn't be here today. Wow. True story. I'm not embellishing that. And so I'll give you just a few things. We won't talk about others behind the scenes. And to wrap it up, if we think back to, we had enough history coming up in 2000s about, if you remember, developmental math was really a huge issue, and still is. But during that time, based on the work, having the state directors being one of our co-sponsors, their meeting, President Obama had been elected and had kicked off the announcement for the American Graduation Initiative. And again, one of those little ironic things of timing. I literally was one of the top officials from in education was speaking to the state directors. I was literally had my suitcase and was getting ready to go out the door, and said, if you're really looking for solutions in that area, you ought to see what, at that time, University of Florida, Bellwether Awards is happening, because they are outstanding programs that can be replicated, that could help achieve your graduation initiative. And if that hadn't happened, that was the impetus we've been talking about for the Bellwether College Consortium. How can we work together to formalize this to spread the good word that you're doing? And so for the 2014 one, it was during that time of how do we, the 20th anniversary, further tell your stories and learn from the wonderful replication and stories that can make a difference, which led to the Legacy Award. So we were sitting around in the office, Tim Wilson, Tino Daniels, some of the doctoral students came up with the idea of help build it, let's create the Legacy Awards called NOAA, Are You In? That led to NOAA's being part of the kickoff, Back to the Future being Marty McFly in his shoes playing, if you remember that movie. I played Doc, and we celebrated the 20th anniversary and had our first Legacy Award. And so it really is fitting, I think, for the future. But again, the primary impact and impetus of this was not only in the leadership development, but this was during a time, and it still is sadly today, you're the unrecognized heroes of higher education, of doing wonderful work, of serving students in your community and providing opportunity for those who might not otherwise be served. And one of the primary reasons for this was, how can we recognize you and the great work you're doing and help that further disseminate? The beauty about this, I'll conclude with this, which was kind of ironic, is administrators, you can relate to this. If you're getting criticism from all sides, that may mean you're doing something right. I happened to be, last story, I was going up the escalator in an ACCT meeting, and I'd just been criticized by one of the state directors because only colleges from Florida win that award. And really? And so as a result of that, I would give an annual update as to who won, and it's competitive, and it's really best practice, rigorous, independent. I was never involved in any decisions, that's, And given that, I'm telling this story, and it happens to be another trustee had been here, and he said, Dale, don't change the thing you're doing, that means you're doing it right. And so, again, that was another reaffirmation, and that state has since then won some, but it was based upon competitive selection and merit. And so with that, I'm excited to not only learn, because usually I'm only able to stick my head in these things. For the first time, I can actually sit on one for a while, quite seriously. And it's, if it hadn't been for outstanding individuals that have helped make it possible, it's all been about celebrating you and the institutions and moving it forward. Leadership programs to provide opportunities for our students in the future. And special thanks to a lot of folks. If I even started, you would be bored silly. I'm not gonna do that. So all of you who know you made a difference and helped build it, thank you so much. And I look forward to learning from you for the next 25. Tim, over.
Campbell to share some thoughts about the history of this. There was kind of a selfish motivation as well, because I've been doing this now for, I think it's my 8th year. And every time I get to hear more of the story that's been behind this and why we're here today. And I thought it was really good to hear, just to understand what has brought us here and how we're going to continue to build upon what you started. And secondly, the video of Marty McFly and Doc Brown is on our YouTube channel. So if you want to see that go viral, you can help with that. But in honor of what Dr. Campbell has done, we would not let you get away with, one of the key things in the Bellwether Consortium is awards. And we have a special award for Dr. Dale Campbell for all his contribution to higher education. This is for your leadership as a Bellwether innovator and educator.